Welcome to the world of Level Up Weekly, a bounteous, open podcast filled with amazing loot, legitimately challenging enemies, but not too difficult to defeat, and of course, the EXP. Join our fellow big headphone adventurers Dylan the Dude and Spernaday as they journey on a quest to find the EXP from gaming news and discussion. Hello everybody and welcome to Level Up Weekly, your weekly EXP for gaming news, and I am Spernaday. Joining alongside with me is Dylan the Dude. Welcome once again for a great podcast episode, guys. This is going to be a pretty exciting one.
A great discussion.
This one is one that we decided to sit down and really just ask one question. And that one question was, does the prize pool truly impact how we determine the success of an esport? And really just to see what exactly is built behind an esport. How do companies make so much revenue out of the whole scenario? How exactly does the amount of viewership coincide with the amount of prize pool? Or even so, how does prize pool, audience viewership, and additional other revenue sources really coincide and just build together the esport environment that we see?
And we did hours of stat crunching, hard labor, looking up definitions, looking up just everything you could to make a great quality filled episode for you, our viewers. And we had a lot of fun doing it. And hey.
Now, of course, with that, our slight disclaimer is we're not necessarily professionals about this. This
No.
is something that we pulled from information from online. It was kind of like one of those things where you're in university where you have a project that's coming up and you wanted to do some research about it to find more information. And then it was like a couple extra things that you Googled beyond that to see what else it was. So
you have your sources, but you don't really have like the academic sources or the extensively proper methodology to, be like us. We can't write a scholastic journal on this or anything.
We're smart, but we're not geniuses. And of course, if you are someone that is in the scene and you have seen more specific stats on this, we'd love to hear about it over, whether it be on our Twitter, twitter.com/levelupweekly, whether it would be through our comments section, whether it be through the community Patreon page, whatever that it would be. We love to hear you guys' feedback. So on that extra note here, one thing before we get into this podcast, our Patreon page, of course, is now live. It's been live, but now it's live longer than it was beforehand. And
it's very alive.
It's very live. And so with that, we want to just first of all say anybody that is currently supporting our Patreon right now, thank you so much for that support. It is something that's going to keep us to continue to do this podcast, to continue to drive ourselves to make even better content for you guys, and to continue to see what we are currently building here in the community. Now, of course, with Patreon, there is sweet perks that come to it. I'll call them levels. If you donate $1, you're at level 1, which means that you are at the point that we just say thank you in a little text box in the beginning of the stream for Twitch. Now, if it's with and of course in our YouTube description, we'll also thank you individually there too. And alongside with that, if you do $5 a month, you are then promoted to I believe we have a section for you in our ad run. And also at the end of the show, there's a little section for you too. After that, it just keeps getting better. And you can check all of those awesome specific goals in a link in the description down below.
And we're happy to provide those extra benefits, those levels, those perks for you because you support us. And without you, we wouldn't be here.
We wouldn't be sitting in 2 chairs trying to babble about video games. So with that, guys, thank you so much for all that you help us out with, and we hope that you enjoy this episode of Level Up Weekly.
Enjoy the show.
Cool. Okay, tell me what you just said
a
second ago. I want you to repeat that because now we're recording. I want to hear what you just said.
So Persona 5, the creators of Persona 5, Atlas, have issued a mandate that you cannot play past a certain part in the game on stream or while being recorded. You cannot show certain boss fights, certain boss designs, certain character designs, or spoil certain parts of the story without being punished for it by having strikes put against your YouTube, your Twitch, your Beam, or whatever platform you're streaming on.
Okay.
So they are basically trying to punish you if you decide to stream the game and stream past a certain point.
That's so stupid though. I just don't get why that is a good idea in any sense. Okay, but see when they say past a certain point, do you know like what certain point we're talking
Well,
about? Is this like 30%
well,
in or
they tell you what days you cannot ship because the Persona series is done on a calendar. Like
Okay.
you start out, I think it's like 5-1 or 5-2, and then you go by day, and it's like past 7/29, which is only about 25 to 30% of the way through the game.
Okay.
Because it's a long game. It's a
Yeah.
very long time consuming game.
Mm-hmm.
And if you play past that day, you will get banned. They will issue complaints. They will issue strikes against you. And you can't do anything about it.
What in the world? That is just to me so stupid. I'll just be out front and say it. This is just really stupid that they would run that idea.
That's the general consensus.
But, well, okay. Let's just take it from the eyes of the company for a second here and just think about it. Why would they want to enforce such a strict policy to it and basically pull what Nintendo did to YouTube about 2 to 3 years ago, maybe even last year? But why would they want to do that, though?
Here's the reason why they want to do it, and it is 100% a pride in what you've created thing. They do not want They basically don't want the game spoiled.
Okay.
And that is the basic one reason why they don't want it ruined for anyone. They believe that the best way to experience Persona is by playing it yourself and experiencing it yourself.
Okay.
And by that is why they do not want it to be quote unquote watered down by just watching someone on Twitch play it. Or watch someone on Twitch, goof on it or gag on it. They believe it is such a great story and they put so much time into it and in the character development and everything that they will punish you if you spoil it for people. And that's what they consider spoiling.
Well, I don't even know like what I have to really respond back to that. Because I just literally learned about this 15 seconds ago. You told me off air, and then I was like, wait a minute, hold on. 1 second, Dylan. Clicks
Click.
all the recording buttons. Okay, tell that again. I'm just trying to wrap why that would be a logical move. I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
That you want to keep the story preserved for people to have a unique experience tailored to the game. But at the same time, though, let's just say that Telltale Games did that with The Walking Dead, with any of their game series. I wonder how many people would not have a career right now because of that.
Telltale gives you the option to have the people watching you play choose what you say.
Exactly. That's why I'm just sitting back here just kind of aghast right now, because that's just kind of stupid to me that you have a video game that you put a lot of time into and is overall a decent game. I know from a lot of reviews that I have read, it is a good story built game. However, I just still don't see why that's an advantage. Then again, I'll say it again. I can kind of see where they're coming from. They don't want to really spoil it, and you want to have more people buy the game to have the unique experience for themselves. But at the same time, though, that's what a majority of our market has been for the last, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. What if this was the 1990s? I would have been all for what you just said a second ago.
Here's the two reasons I can think of, the two justifications as to why this is. One, intense pride in making a game. They spent 7, 8, 9 years making this game, and they put so much passion and love into it that I can understand that. And two, the reason why they do it, and I don't want to make this seem like anything it's not, and it might just be from our perspective because we're Americans. But, and you have to remember, all the times that we've had this in the past, it was Japanese companies. It was Nintendo. Yeah. It was Atlas, which is, Japanese company.
Yeah.
Maybe the Japanese, and correct us if it's a culture thing or if it's just something that we don't fully understand, might have a more accepting view of this because it might be something that's, just kind of more personal, more respectful, maybe.
One thing that's just kind of talking about that, one thing that I'm really curious about, and I'd love for any of you guys watching this podcast to actually elaborate on this more for at least myself. I'm really curious what the gaming environment is like in Japan versus here. Like, of course, there's the obvious component. People play video games and they play them either competitively or not. There's the fun type, there's mobile, there's all of these other versions. But the question is, when it comes to stuff like this in Persona 5, is in Japan, do they have a gigantic Twitch audience, a YouTube audience, or I actually don't know if it's allowed there, but do they have an audience that they can do stuff like this and watch multiple games?
That would be interesting, but I do know one fact about Japanese gaming, and that is that PC gaming is still looked at as just a weird thing. Like,
yeah, why do you think the Nintendo blows up so well over there?
If you're a gamer in Japan, you have a console, most likely. If you don't have a console and you are a PC gamer, you are odd, weird, a shut-in, a recluse. You aren't normal. You have something weird with you. Like, that is how they look at PC gamers. And
right.
To be fair, I mean, we haven't always looked at PC gaming the best here.
Yeah.
But it's certainly gotten better over the years.
Well, I can definitely say that it's kind of like a fashion trend that came back that people almost either didn't want back or just are glad to have it back. Because I mean, PC gaming when in general it first came out, before consoles were created, it was running off of computer systems and the classic vintage Macintosh systems, PCs from Macintosh computers, I guess I should say, not PCs, back in the 80s. And then following forward, it eventually was able to compress this into a console. They were happy that it was able to go into a console, but then people realized you could put more power behind a PC, and that's why you saw this trend where console then moved over to PC. Thank you, Gabe Newell, actually, because through a lot of what he built was the main reason that we now see PC gaming as we do today, because of Steam in general taught us how to distribute games, how to develop games, and really just how to make our gaming environment a little bit better.
But on that same vein, you still have things like what was Steam's attempts at a console? The Steam Box, or yeah. The thing is, PC gaming still isn't so well known here, or still so well accepted here, that they still felt the need to create the Steam Box, even if it would have been a financial failure. And I'm not sure if it is or not, but I'm kind of assuming it was not the greatest financial gain for them.
The thing is, I think there's two ways that they went about this. There was a Steam Link, which I do own in my house. I have used, and it's decent. But the problem is that it maxes out to 100 megabit per second internet, and then if your connection already at home isn't that great, and if you have traffic on there, it just isn't as fun. There's a lot of lag input, some other things, and then of course there's the Steam Box, which is basically a mini PC that you can build on a budget and still save money off of. And it's like any situation when it comes to PC master race in general. Most people like to custom build it because they save themselves quite a lot of money out of the situation. For example, myself, I custom built my PC, and I put... I would probably argumentatively say in similar spec features, probably about $1,400. I spent $990. I'll just make it $1,000 off of it. So I say $400 off of it. Granted, I found some really good sales that week, but anyway, well, that's how that came out. So, but yeah, I just kind of tailing back. Persona 5, that's just so stupid to me.
I mean, it's a fantastic game. I've played it. It's probably one of my favorite games of the year.
But that's the thing, though. Like, it's a great game. I agree. But it's I don't know. I think that's stupid, but that's not the real reason that we're like necessarily here today for this podcast. Today's episode is really to kind of divulge into answering this one main question that I thought about lately, and I thought would be really cool to talk about on this podcast, which is, does prize pool show or determine your success in an esport environment? For example, does Dota 2's $20 million international in 2017, let me confirm that real quickly, 2017?
We have the stats
2016,
right
sorry, 2016. The international in 2016, is that saying that Dota 2 is monumentally greater than League of Legends World Championship at $5 million, or all the way down to Rocket League Championship Series where they were $250,000? You know, we're going to take a look at that today. That's going to be one of our main focuses. We want to actually answer that question and see how your overall viewership is impacted into it, how your prize pool could be associated. How do you even get the money that comes in from the revenue from these events? what exactly determines success, and that's what we're kind of here for today. But before we jump into that, I thought this was kind of funny, and I'd like to share this with you guys as well. So recently on Twitter, there was a pretty entertaining video that I enjoyed. For those of you that don't know her, it's okay. It's not expected if you aren't, a sports savvy person.
It was the first I heard of her.
Yeah, same actually for me. She's a part of The Herd, which, if those of you that don't know, it's a show that's featured on ESPN, of which is just basically talk about sports in general. That's the generalistic way I'm going to go about it. And she's actually a supporter for esports going into this market. And recently, there was a big news headline that NBA 2K had 17 official NBA teams take part in the esports competition for NBA 2K, which is actually really cool.
Yeah.
When you think about it, the games that are based on legitimate real life sports
have their own esports scene.
So now there's a literal virtual version of the games that you probably played when you were in elementary school and gym class in high school. If you played like myself on the varsity level, or in college in the varsity, whatever, it's kind of, again, it's cool to see that. I know NHL has some potential that's coming up for it.
Oh, yep.
I think Madden actually has a league.
Madden
has a large league, actually. I'm very impressed with their overall esports scene. It's kind of cool to watch. One of the things I didn't like, though, is that some of the productions that I went and watched, they would still keep the other broadcaster, the default one that's in the game, still on. And so now the thing is that their audio levels were decently balanced, that like you could obviously hear the main caster
better, yeah,
but you could still hear the default ones, like throws out to McFadden and a touchdown or whatever that they would do. And then there's a guy on top of it that's trying to cast that, and it's just this double delay. And I was like, my audio ears can't handle that. I'm just not a fan of it.
I get paid to monitor a Twitch stream for an online wrestling league.
Yep.
And we have a commentator.
Yeah.
And I am the guy that works the tech for it. Mm-hmm. I had the wherewithal and the know-withal to go into the game settings and turn off the voice for the announcer, the voice for the commentators.
Yeah.
So that you don't hear him going, and he just hit him with the move. And
right.
It's like
exactly.
having it be a weird double odd commentary.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. So please, for those of you that do real life esports, that sounds weird to put it like that. I'm actually, what is the proper term for that? If someone could actually mention it to me in the comments, I'd appreciate that.
Learn from me. Do what I do. Do everything
this
like
man
the
has a
dude
pocket
does.
protector. Respect his decisions. I don't even know why that matters anything, because now it's starting to become a regular trend to have
so weird
pocket
too.
protectors.
But
Welcome
more
to
on that
today's
later.
society. So anyway, back to this video. Sorry for diverting. So Christine Leahy, I think that's how you say her last name, was in this discussion in Herdline News, where 17 teams, where NBA teams are going to participate in the inaugural season of NBA 2K League, and someone was on the show. I apologize, I actually don't know the name. They weren't really mentioned in this Twitter system. So, but just in general, I found a good laugh out of this video.
Are we going to throw this on stream?
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and throw it on stream here. This is, of course, applicable to the right fair use policies. If it's not, I guess we screwed up. But you know what?
And we can edit this part out for future broadcasts.
There you go. So, all right, let me transition over here so that you guys can see it.
2K Esports League just announced today that 17 NBA teams are going to participate in the inaugural season, set to debut in 2018. I could not be more excited about this.
To watch other people play video games?
Well,
there's the first part.
It's NBA 2K, and you don't get it unless you've actually been to an event.
I've played NBA 2K. I like him. I've demolished my son in NBA 2K. I demolished my son in Madden, although he likes to play in the same team.
You have so much fun doing that.
I know, but I don't want to see somebody else play a video game.
So I like this guy's argument to start out with, because I wanted to take a couple of seconds to just kind of dissect what exactly happens in this video. So you see this guy basically go in and say, I don't want to watch other people play video games. And I'm like, well, then clearly you don't want to watch other people play regular sports. I don't know. Maybe that's just the theory. But, if you want to throw that out there, I guess then that argument's invalid.
I mean, sir, why did I, back in the day, pay $40 or however much I paid to go to a Cubs Diamondbacks game? But I don't want to watch people swing bats on a field.
Right. Yeah, people are geniuses.
That was the
what it
chick in
is.
college that you're like, dude, she comes over and watches you play video game.
You're
Interact
watching
with
someone
her.
else play a game when you go to a basketball game, so what's the difference?
It's different because they're actually performing a physical activity as
So
opposed to.
are esports.
I love this part. This is the part where I got really annoyed because I was like, hold on 1 second. Not necessarily the demonstration part of it, but okay. So this guy basically goes out and says, this is not a legitimate physical activity. Okay, in theory, you could literally do this. Any form of physical movement that is involved with this game and any skill-based integration that you're going to need for it is, by the Oxford definition of sport, a legitimate sport. So then that's the thing that I'm going off of it, because he says, well, it's not a legitimate sport. Anything! Chess
Look at
is
chess.
applicable.
That's what we were talking about before the show. Doing this. That's a sport.
Exactly.
And also, I also disagree with him intensely, and I'm going to show the kind of a definition here with your controller, physical controller. For people who are into fighting games, this right here, quarter circle, Y, high, low, dump that, and you have to do so many inputs that if you don't count this as actual physical, quarter, man, I messed that up. Quarter, because you can also mess these things up if you're not precise.
Yep.
These need precision. These need actual physical inputs.
Yep.
So for this guy to say doing something physical, this really is physical.
It
In
is.
every way, every sense of the word, unless you're playing VR and you literally sit there and you're like controlling it with your blinks or something. But even then, that's still physical.
That's actually still applying a skill-based integration into it. A physical skill-based integration. By the way, also to add the definition in front of an audience or to entertain for an audience. So that in of itself is also in the sequence too. Sport, if we just go by the strict definition that it is, most things are considered a sport. And this to me was really funny as we listened later
As
on.
opposed to up, down, left, right, A, B, A, B, A,
As
B.
we said a second
they
ago.
actually have to do like hand exercises to make sure that their thumbs are working properly. They have to
Do you know how many
well
people
under
have carpal
stress.
tunnel or
They
strained
have
their
to make sure
wrists
that their vision
in
is
a
on
lot of
point
major
for these
CS:GO
things,
or
like
League of Legends
their
outlets?
brains have
Ask
to
your
be able to
Dota
function
players.
at a really high pace.
Listen. Esports, to me, okay, and it's a nerd bowl. It's okay. Like, nerds inherit the earth. They end up, there's
The
far
world
more.
would be nothing without nerds.
I agree with that. I also think, though, this is kind of like the X Games, where if they have drug testing and you don't have something in your system, like then you probably can't participate, right? Because
More on that.
I love this because, okay, now of course we're picking apart one guy in this situation, and I'll understand that it's one guy probably against an entire community at this point, and I'm sure that if he ever wanted to invest into esports, I'm sure nobody would ever like him ever again. But the thing that I find really funny about this discussion is that he basically stereotypes everybody as being weed and pot smokers, and I'm just kind of sitting back here laughing as I go, man, I have never, ever involved myself in any drug abuse. But you know what? It's really funny how he's just like, everybody does it. I'm like, okay. And then when you go into CSGO, by the way, they do have a drug test policy that you implement underneath their system. And I think Cloud9 had an influctuation a couple years ago with that.
I believe it was Cloud9 had one of their, I think it was in CSGO, they had one of their members actually fail the drug test, so they had to use one of the replacements.
Yep.
And that makes this a sport. It's subjected to the same rules, the same regulations. You can't dope. Don't know what good doping would do to help you in a normal esports game.
If worst case, it would dull your senses.
Yeah, and I don't think people smoke before doing any sort of esports competition because you need the strict laser focus.
Right.
You need all the skills you have to win at these high-level competitive tournaments.
Right. Okay, next part.
think of Cheeto eater, pot smoker, play video game all day.
That's so not even true.
We are
of course,
Cheeto
some of
eater
them smoke
pot
a little weed,
smokers.
which is totally fine. But that's not true. If you ever go to these events, they are selling more tickets in other countries than we do the Super Bowl.
Look,
It's that big.
there's lots
Also
of people
true.
that watch these gamers on YouTube. I don't get it. There's also
And Twitch
there's
and at events.
There's also
even
people.
in the United States.
Listen, there's lots of people that watch WWE. Neither
Yeah?
are sports.
Wow.
Lots of people watch. They make lots of money.
I always found this funny because I know that you're a WWE fan, so I found it really entertaining that we they decided to bash WWE not being a legitimate sport. Now, granted, I can understand there is somewhat of a scripted aspect to that system.
Yes.
However, is it not still entertaining people? Does it not still involve a physical activity? And
Oh.
also, is it still a skill-based activity?
It really is all around, and it's funny. The only reason why, and this is a small thing, but the reason why, do you know why pro wrestling is scripted?
To make it so that they make more money. I'm not sure,
Well,
actually.
it's mostly done because back in 1972, one of the last legitimate pro wrestling matches where there was no predetermined outcome was a 13-hour match with
Yeah.
no decisive victor.
Yeah.
So that's why they do the scripting, so that they can make it, watchable for
Right.
fans. But in the case of this guy saying that, it takes no physical effort for wrestlers or gamers, it totally does. And heck, actually, funny crossover, there are two wrestlers, Kenny Omega and Austin Creed, that actually competed these last 3 years at both the Killer Instinct, Street Fighter V, and Street Fighter IV World Championships.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess, wrestling or gaming, according to this guy, it doesn't have any sport, like, it's not sports, but you still do a lot of training.
Yeah.
You put yourself through the ringer to condition yourself for these things. You have to learn your inputs, you have to learn your craft. And to me, it's almost asinine of this guy to say, oh, just because I'm not a fan of these two things, or I have a really narrow perspective of these two things, I'm going to say they're not sports.
Right.
And that is just, again, asinine to me.
Right.
It just shows a really complete lack of understanding to what you're talking about, and just shows that you're a very narrow-minded person.
Right. So let's just continue the
I
rest
just
of
can't
it.
personally get into it.
Well,
even if
WWE is fake. This is real.
no, it's
So,
not.
yeah,
They're
it
not
is.
really putting a ball in the basket. They're playing a video game of
They're
computer
doing the
graphics
move on their
device.
device. Because there's different devices for different games
I love his face,
to make
too.
that ball go in the basket.
Okay.
Listen, I think it's really cool. And by the way, of course, the Jazz are on the list of the 17th.
All right, and the rest of that covers on with the Jazz
Yeah.
situation there. So first of all, if you guys have not seen that video here, we'll be sure to provide
A link.
the source with the link in the description. This is, again, Christine Lee putting that. She posted this on Twitter. It was originally on Herdline News, which is overall a decent show. It does cover a lot of interesting topics in the regular physical sports. I'll just use that as a source. But yeah, it's just really funny to me how it was treated as if this wasn't a legitimate sports system. How this was like, oh, yeah, this is totally not any of those. To me, one thing I'm going to come out of like watching this video now several times is that it's a classic example of a new craft being involved in the market today that not a lot of people are aware that there's a lot more that goes behind that sequence.
Yeah.
I don't really know if there's really a sport that I could associate that to at the moment. I'll just try to say, let's just say, for example, basketball back in the day when it was first invented and they were using peach baskets.
Yeah.
To go from a college PE activity that multiple colleges decided to involve themselves into, and then eventually work together to then play against each other with their teams, and then eventually leading on to now, a multi-billion-dollar environment. I think that's safe to say that this is kind of what we're watching right now with esports. And now, the thing that I'm not necessarily a big fan of right now is that we associate esports with more or less the whole category itself. So we have so for example, if I just took sports and I took esports, if I compared the two, sports obviously has way more money than esports category does. However, the same amount of viewership actually applies to it, which to me is pretty crazy underneath there.
And also to note that the winners of the Dota World Championships actually made more money per team member, so this is splitting the prize pool, than the winner of the Masters makes.
Yep.
So that in and of itself shows that, there is something with esports.
Yeah.
And that is comparable to normal, what we would
Now,
traditional.
to add on
sports.
top of that, in League of Legends, we kind of said this before in a podcast episode once before, but League of Legends, their concurrent viewership was more than watching the NBA Finals in the same year, which I believe was 2015.
Yeah.
So that's also something to add along to that as well. But now that we've kind of got that underneath wraps here to warm ourselves up,
Yeah.
I think the real question that we're gonna reiterate again is just does a prize pool really make that esport category or game, excuse me, more successful than the other one? So
Now, I'm going to start off this, if you don't mind.
Sure.
But first, we have to kind of define what we think successful
Yeah.
is. Because you can view successful as anything. You can just viewer count, money made, how many supporters you have, how many platforms you're on, distribution,
yeah.
marketing, merchandising. You can... So many things can go into what you would be able to define as successful. The example I gave with you, and it's not a perfect example, but I'll reiterate it here, before the show, was the NFL. The New England Patriots are one of the top championship teams in the. They're in the playoffs the most often. They make it the furthest. They win so many Super Bowls, so many championships. But you can compare them to our Chicago Bears, local-ish enough. And while nowhere near as much championship success, we do actually have a lot of revenue, like fan support, and actually make more money some years than the New England Patriots do.
Yeah.
Simply due to ticket sales, merchandising, and so many other things.
Right.
So is that what we're basing success off of? Because in that case, the losing team Bears would be more successful than the New England Patriots.
Right. Yeah, I think that our definition of success needs to be further refined, because when we ask the question of what exactly is success, there is a couple of things that we could go behind. Of course, if I ask the accountant / business head, they're going to go with the highest money.
Yeah, the highest profit or revenue.
If
Yeah.
I ask someone that works in TV or production, they're going to say the view count. If I ask someone off the street really randomly, they're probably going to say prize pool. And so each person will kind of have their own definition of what exactly a successful esport is, or what is considered more successful. So I think one of the things that we wanted to iterate too is that, like, in this discussion, of course, this is just two esport tech and esport enthusiasts here that really just want to see that this grow to be a more developed situation. But of course, with you guys watching in whatever platform that you're watching this from, first of all, thank you. Second of all, we would love to hear your input, of course, in our comment section, and we'd love to hear what exactly your 2 cents about the situation with esports is as well.
As a little bit of a disclaimer, we are not professional game theorists. We are not professional. We have not done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of research. Mm-hmm. If you have a better methodology than what we use here in this discussion / breakdown, let us know, and we'll maybe try to apply that and maybe call back to it in a future episode, or
Right.
kind of rethink our thinking. But from what we've come up with, the following discussion that we're going to have is kind of what we have come to. We've done the research, and this is, in our minds, what makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So carrying on with this, I think one of the things that we obviously want to put out in the way is just a couple of statistics to kind of first base our original thoughts off of. So first thing I want to really cover is what prize pools that we've seen over the last few years.
Do you want to show this on stream?
We can go ahead and show. Well, I'll just kind of discuss them right now. We'll transition when we feel appropriate. But according to esportsearnings.com, largest overall prize pools in esports. We actually covered this in an episode beforehand with a certain extent. But one thing that's kind of interesting is that the top 11 here are, let's see, one of them is League of Legends, and the other 10 are from Dota 2 and their major prize pool that goes underneath that there. So first of all, let's just kind of step back for a minute and think about this. Why does Dota 2 have 10 out of 11 of the highest prize pools that we have seen so far?
Well, of course, there's one thing, and I know for a fact League of Legends does this tremendously, and I know Dota 2 does it to an extent, but their prize pools are partially funded by the creators through the money that they raise, mostly through microtransactions.
I would actually reverse what you just said there, because you said League of Legends does a better job. League of Legends does imply that, but they don't
Okay, I
necessarily
swapped them.
run as much into their game as what Dota 2 is. Dota 2 flat out tells people, hey, the profits that we get from, like, say, specific items that you get from crates, I believe so. I apologize. I'm not necessarily a heavy Dota 2 player. But the money that comes from that is impacted into their prize pool.
Yeah.
That's where they come in with that. League of Legends is a lot of corporate sponsorships, and we'll actually discuss that a little bit later. But that's where we see a lot of our proponents here. So that's why you see Dota 2 have as big of a prize pool, in my opinion, as that. Because if you look at the average amount of users that play Dota 2, counteract that to the people that play League of Legends, counteract that to basically any other game at this current point. I'll just use a Steam specific platform. So let me cut out League of Legends for a second. Dota 2 has been the top game played for Steam in the last, I believe, 8 years.
Yeah.
Since basically the game came out.
I think the only thing that ever rivaled
With
it...
an extent, excuse me, let me correct that. With an extent, I think it was actually a year after it developed. That was one of the highest games that they played.
If I remember correctly, I think one of the only things that's ever beat it, even momentarily, was like maybe TF2 at a time, but even then, it was.
I would
only
counter
for a
that.
while.
I'd actually say TF2 was definitely on that list. I would actually say CS:GO.
CS:GO.
Counter-Strike Source, when that was out, was more likely taking the top charts. Then went to Global Offensive, so I'm most likely seeing that there was a trade-off that happened there. But nowadays, you see
It's
Dota 2
dominant.
still takes over it because it's a free game, and if you are a mobile player, you play something free, then it's just kind of carries out from there.
On a side note, the first game that the highest paid or the highest prize pool that is not a MOBA is actually the 13th, which was the Halo World Championship. So
Yeah.
it took Halo 5 Guardians was the last, or was the biggest non-MOBA prize pool.
Right. Now, to add to that, that was also in 2016.
16,
A
yeah.
lot of these events we actually see here are from 2016, 2015, 2014.
There's
so
a few 2017s,
2013 is actually in here as well. In that, like, I'm just looking at the top 15 to focus on that to start with. And so we're looking now, of course, like I said, 10 out of 11 in the top 11 are Dota 2. That's 20 million down to 2.8 million that they're covering. Then, in addition to that, most of them are from 2013 is one of them. The other are actually from 2016, 2017,
2015.
and 2014 is in here, if I didn't just say that a second ago. So you see a lot of current numbers there right now. So if
More
we
recent.
if we touched base on this 5 years ago or something, we probably wouldn't see the same numbers we do today. In fact, I don't think we would see Dota's International really hitting that. Nope, actually, let me correct myself, because 2011, 2012, top 20, actually, at 1.6 million. And I'm going to go ahead and transition that so you guys kind of see what exactly we're looking at here in terms of numbers. Of course, you see right now that we have the International over on the top listing, then follows down to E-League, which goes to World Electronic Sports Games, which is just basically CSGO, Dota 2. We're involved in these situations here, but that's where we're getting this from. If you're interested, again, we'll provide our sourcing over in the description as well.
Link below or wherever the description is.
Exactly. Or worst case scenario, Google it. You'll
Yeah.
find it. Don't worry.
It's very easy.
We like I said, we're not professionals. We're just master Googlers.
Yeah, and heck, when you did that short transition, they could even pause, look up at the bar, and just type that in. So
Exactly.
don't be lazy, ladies and gentlemen.
So safe to say, we see some pretty heavy numbers underneath the prize pool. We haven't
Yes.
even touched on the revenue build and how exactly companies even get into the revenue that comes in out of this situation here. And that's also something that we decided to look up too, because we wanted to make sure we were prepared.
Yes.
So one of the things that this is from 2015. This is the revenue generated from esports fans in North America. This was totaling to $143 million. Right now, they're projecting by 2020 that we're supposed to be hitting $1.3 billion in revenue in a total accumulation of all esports situations right now.
That's
so
a big
safe
number.
to say, we're not actually in a billion. We're not billionaires, to theoretically put it like that. We're not billionaires in the esports market yet. We are about to be
Yes.
in 3 years from now. And so that's going to be something that's going to be looking forward to it. This is even 2015's number. This is 143 million.
That's insane.
You move up $900 million. Okay, technically like a 1.3 million, 1.2 million.
Yeah.
But you get my drift. You almost move up 10 times the original amount that you started with, which just goes to show you that people realized there was a market here and they wanted to hit the ground running and invest into it.
Yeah, exactly. And now we're looking at a graph here, which you'll see here in a few minutes. But let's kind of dissect what we have here. So we have the revenue breakdown for esports, the revenue from North America in 2015. Now, you might be asking yourself, what raises the most money? What raises the least money for revenue for esports?
Yep.
Let's take a look.
So we're going to go ahead and take a look at this. Thanks to Engadget for preparing this great article here. Again, as we will for most of our situations, we'll put the links in the description.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can just hear us talk about it and put in our 2 cents about the situation here. So 2015 revenue generated from esports fans in North America, totaling out to $143 million here. So at the top of the list, we see corporate sponsorships going out with $111.1 million, which is approximately about 70% of 75 actually of their total amount that goes to the amount in their revenue. Then following that, we see prize pool contributions going at 11.8. Then coming to merchandise sitting at 11. Ticket sales go at 4.5, and then other categories,
Everything
just being
else.
other miscellaneous transactions within the game, and could be anything under the sun that basically made them money, was 4.6 million. So now seeing that graph, let's just take a second here to realize something, that prize pool contributions, merchandise, ticket sales, and the other category make 25%.
Less than.
No, they just make 25% of the total revenue pool that comes out of from that year.
Yes, 22.3% if you're being exact from hours.
I had a calculator out, but I decided to close it.
Even if you round it up to 25%, which we can generously do, especially assuming that maybe ticket sales were better in 2017 or merchandising was better in 2017, even the prize pool being bigger.
Yeah.
Still, only at generous estimation, 25% of the revenue. Now, all of those things combined, what did we not mention? Corporate sponsorships.
Yeah, the other fact that we see like major prize pools like this come out of the scenario, but the fact that you had 111 million come from corporate sponsorships just kind of tells you something right there. To me, it says that, hey, we probably wouldn't exist if we didn't have someone else sponsoring us. And that's where a lot of today's market really trended to. That's why we have things like YouTube, Twitch, Beam, products like
Hitbox.
Streaming, Hitbox, yeah, streaming services like that we can just make a free account with our email and be able to watch, because that is a free broadcast for us to watch. Well, most of them, depending on the situation.
YouTube Red.
Yeah, exactly. So sorry, almost lost my train of thought with that. But that's where we can get and just sign up with a simple email and then follow in and be able to watch this for free, which is great because we don't pay anything, but they're making a crap ton of money because that 30-second spot that they put in the Dota 2 International Championships was like a couple $100,000.
And that kind of leads me to my personal point is I don't personally believe that prize pool is definitely what determines success, but why do corporations sponsor anything?
Right.
It's to promote themselves. It's to advertise themselves. It's to get their name out there.
Yep.
And that means advertising. And how do you judge a successful advertising? By how many people see it. Mm-hmm. By how many people view it and take it in. So that means, I guess, by transitive property or associative property, that because the viewers are the ones that are watching, they're the ones that are seeing these advertisements, they are the reason why corporations want to sponsor, so that their things can be seen. As a matter of fact, they mentioned WWE earlier, and we talked a little bit about it. WWE right now is, in wrestling in America, is still, like, they still get 3-4 million viewers every week.
Yeah.
Actually is being sponsored, the next pay-per-view event, by Rocket League.
Which is kind of funny how we have so many major chains come in for video games, and now a video game is coming in for a major chain to sponsor them, which
Exactly.
is surprising, actually, because I would never think that a game that is involving soccer would sponsor a wrestling a wrestling company. However, now that they kind of mentioned this in one of their posts, that a lot of their team were giant WWE fans, so I think that kind of persuaded them one way or another.
But also, even then, you have to look at some of the other companies that advertise for the WWE or use the WWE for advertising. Snickers, a multi-million-dollar name, like brand name. Coca-Cola, $1 million or like billion-dollar brand name. Really, almost anything that decides to go with wrestling or to promote with wrestling makes a lot of money because wrestling is still one of the most viewed things in the States. So for video games now, and especially like Rocket League, to be promoting themselves and to be partnering with WWE, that's incredible. But why is Rocket League doing that? For
the publicity.
For viewership, for advertising.
What is 99.9% of the reason that you always do marketing is because you will end up getting your name out to another person that didn't know about the game. They'll go out and they'll buy it. That's why a majority of companies you see in the United States of America, it could apply differently in different in different countries. In the United States, one of the main proponents you have in corporate business that you spend the most money on is advertisement/marketing. Why do you do that, though? Because that investment into the advertisement is going to end up getting you more people to come and spend their money on your items.
What good is a product if no one knows about it?
Right.
And in that case, we're going here. We did the math, and it was 70, I believe it was somewhere in the mid to upper 70% for just corporate sponsorship.
Yeah, it was about, well, we said about 75%.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say it was about like 77%, 23% to be like really accurate. Yeah. But of course, the numbers can also be tallied on there too.
And
but
also
yes.
change through year to year.
Yeah.
But even assuming that, that means that what really determines a successful esport isn't the merchandising. It isn't the ticket sales at live events. It isn't the prize pool by any mean. It is the dedication, the support, and the love that everyone who watches, who takes the time out of their day to go on Twitch or go on TBS or go wherever they go to watch it.
Right.
Because you get advertised to, and you help support the esport that you watch.
Right.
So, to me, it's not, how much money you can get in the prize pool from, microtransactions in the case of Dota 2.
Yeah.
Or whatever League of Legends does. I know Halo even has a thing where, like, they take part of the part of the money that they make from the sale of the game just to go into a prize pool for their grand championships.
Overwatch, Blizzard, excuse me,
Wow.
just in general, just has money in their pocket.
It was just like, hey, here's 30 grand. Why not? Or 300 grand. Sorry. However,
whoops, I put a 0 there. She's all right, Tiffany. It doesn't matter. Our accounts receivable won't make a difference.
It's like, did you mean to put 3,000 on that check? Oh, sorry, add a 0. Add another 0.
Wait, you put 2. It's 30,000 now, sir. I said, oh, you mean another 0?
Oh,
yes.
Okay. But
Blizzard in a nutshell.
And Blizzard is crazy with what they do. But they also have Heroes of the Storm, which they also throw money into for esports.
I'm not really sure why.
Well, it's a MOBA. MOBAs are popular. MOBAs will, of course, but
MOBAs will always be popular. That's a part of me that. Okay, to get this out of the way, I personally am not much of a MOBA person, but that doesn't mean that I don't admire the fact that some of the strategy that comes behind playing a MOBA is absolutely insane. Even to another category that I don't play much that I give credit to, MMOs. Oh. I don't play a lot of MMOs, but you know what? For people that dedicate their time and they're hardcore about some of this stuff and have some of the unique skills, strategies, and understanding of the game, it's really cool to see. Can they apply some of it in real life sometimes? I would really hope so. But that's outside of the point, and we're diverting from the subject. But corporate sponsorships, we're really learning that that's kind of the main focus of where they get a lot of the profit margins from. So we can't necessarily say that, well, it's all prize pool, like you said. Just kind of reiterating what you said. It's really coming down to how many people are willing to sponsor the activities that come in behind it. How much money can you additionally make out of this scenario? I know a few people actually in Rocket League Championship Series that talked about this, and it was kind of cool because one of the things that I love about being in an early esports environment is I learn how people, if they make a mistake, they're learning how to fix it, or just in general how to develop that in the future. And one of the things that they learned was that some venues are just insanely expensive to cover, and unless you're expecting an insane amount of people to show up, you're not going to get it covered by venues, by tickets, to be specific. You're going to get it covered by the people that are willing to sponsor you, the merchandise that you're going to sell for it, and just any other thing that's going to be an external source than just literally getting the tickets for it.
And it can even be something as simple, and I remember because I was actually at your place watching this with you. You had one of the Rocket League Grand Championship Series or something on. And I noticed that they were all, I don't remember if it was Mountain Dew, but I remember they were all drinking...
Brisk.
Yeah, Brisk. And that's because...
Take the risk and drink the Brisk.
And that's because Brisk sponsored them. And that gave them a tremendous amount of money.
Yeah.
Because Brisk is not a small company. No, it's, nationally known.
Right.
Almost globally known. So it's companies like that. And again, why do they do that? Why do they have all of their... announcers and commentators drinking Brisk on camera? Because if they like it, you'll like it. And of course,
it's really funny actually to see how a marketing ploy works like that. The amount of people that have now followed on Twitter since Brisk sponsored the Rocket League Championship Series that were passionate supporters of this scene, to see them drink Brisk, have a Twitter picture, here's some Brisk that I'm drinking before yes or whatever. I just really want to know, when stuff like this happens, when you support specific companies like this, like there's some diehard people that support, like I'll just use an example. Say that Dota, for some reason, got a signature sponsorship with Pepsi. And like, when I say signature, I mean that Pepsi was willing to pay enough to the point that every jersey had to have a Pepsi logo on it in order for them to actually be at this event. I don't think you can actually do that, but let's just be practical.
They would make so much money.
The return coming back on it, for the amount of people that are really diehard about Dota, they'll come back and they'll be like, I'm drinking a Pepsi while I'm sitting in the stands, or I'm drinking a Pepsi while I'm sitting by my computer watching the Kyiv Major or something.
Forget you, Coke. Give me my Pepsi.
Exactly.
Although, that actually reminds me of a funny instance of when they did that. Pepsi actually did that with WWE, and it was funny because it was John Cena. John Cena, and for another case of marketing, John Cena was well known for having so many multicolored T-shirts, so many different T-shirts. He became the sponsor of Fruity Pebbles, and that is tremendous. But with this particular one, there was a wrestler that was on commentary, and he was drinking a Diet Pepsi.
Yeah.
And John Cena accidentally runs into him and spills his Diet Pepsi, and their entire 6-month feud that was bloody and battered was all caused by him spilling his Diet Pepsi, and you hear him say, "He spilled my Diet Pepsi," and it was so.
But here's the thing, though. Whenever he said, I know what you're talking about. Whenever he spilled his Diet Pepsi, he would follow in with this scripted line of talking about how Diet Pepsi was such a really genuinely good product or something, or better than Coke. I don't remember what it was, but it was so funny because he would always be like, "You spilled my signature Diet Pepsi, which is only available in blah blah blah," and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is great."
Well, I think one of his exact quotes was, "He spilled my Diet Pepsi." Now that was a quality drink. I mean, it's available at a bunch of stores, but now it's available on the floor because John Cena spilled it. And it was it was still within the realm of wrestling silliness and wrestling seriousness.
Yeah,
but then it was also still, that CM Punk drinks Pepsi? He has a Pepsi tattoo on his arm? Maybe I should drink a Pepsi.
Then there's also the kid side of things too, where if you see someone that you aspire as a role model, you're going to probably follow what they do. Silly example, for me, I wore a ton of Nike products when I went golfing because I was a giant Tiger Woods fan.
Of course.
So that's the proponent example of how marketing works.
Well,
now,
you brought up a really good point there as well, and you have to think, why is another reason that so many corporate sponsorships are sponsoring esports? While esports does have a very diverse demographic, it has so many people from so many different demographics, some of the primary demographics for esports, just by the very nature of being video games, is children and young adults.
Mm-hmm.
So in that same vein where you say you want to be like Tiger Woods, if you're seeing, like the Overwatch Grand Championship sponsored by, let's just say, Coke,
Okay.
then you're going to see that pop up on screen. You're going to be like, man, people who are good at Overwatch should drink Coke. I want to drink Coke.
Yeah.
And that's especially with
Why
kids.
do you think so many people actually, MLG, when that first came in, how many sponsorships do they have with
Mountain Dew, so
Why
many
do you think
Mountain-
that's such a meme nowadays?
Gamer
that MLG people. Oh gosh, don't talk about Gamer Fuel. That was a wasted of a Mountain Dew drink. Let's not divert. Well, we're not even necessarily divulging at this point. It's just more or less or giving our perspective on the marketing aspect to it, which is then helping the success that comes behind it because they're getting the numbers in viewership with a lot of these systems here. How do you think marketing comes into play? It comes into play because people are watching the scenarios here.
We were also originally looking at if ticket sales, like live ticket sales, were a big important part. And it is a percentage of esport revenue, but it's not necessarily the end-all, be-all, as, anywhere you can watch esports, any way you can watch esports does support them because the more popular esports gets in viewership, the more companies are going to want to sponsor them, and as such, the more money they make.
Now, here's one thing that I didn't even think about when we were kind of prepping for this show here was that really there's some arguments that come out here that there's not as many people coming to majors and stuff or going out to arenas to really watch some of the major events that come out. But then that's also a counter argument that comes into play here. Super Bowl, let's just make that as an example. They fill an entire stadium. The maximum capacity they can fill, I don't even know the amount that it actually is. I'm just going to say 500,000 just to be nice. It's probably too much or too less. I'm not sure. But anyway, say 500,000. Cool. You fit 500,000 in a stadium, but then they have how many millions of people that went and actually watched the event itself?
At home.
At home, at their buddy's house, over at a bar, whatever that it would be. They watched it in some other region here. So that's kind of the same proponent that we see when it comes to esports. With a lot of the numbers we have pulled up here, we actually have it from 2015, the same year, by the way, that we pulled the revenue counts for earlier. So some things that we could see for, let's just talk concurrent viewership to start with here. Worlds had the most amount. So League of Legends had the most concurrent viewership at 14 million people across every platform that they sponsored this with. I believe Twitch was the primary source, and I thought they had something with ESPN2.
Yes.
If I remember right.
And to put this into perspective, some of the most highest rated television programs, including the Super Bowl, including general news, the Super Bowl usually does 34.0 or somewhere in that range. And in television ratings, 30, that's millions of viewers.
Yeah.
So if this were to have been on TV, or if you would have measured it with TV metrics, it would have been a 14.0, which is 14 million viewers, which is more than most anything actually gets.
By the way, I said this stat earlier. That's more than the NBA Finals had that same year.
Yes.
Now, tagging along with that, we also see some other things too, and I'll let you guys go ahead and take a look at this as well. We also had things such as, excuse me.
Scroll up slightly so they can see it.
Don't tell me what to do. It's not you ain't my dad. But anyway, esports is with the highest peak concurrent viewership. You saw the International 2015 Dota 2, which again was that year 16 million, if I remember from the previous chart. Then we had 4.6 million. IEM and ESLs typically had about 1 to 2 million. DreamHack had about 985,000. If we're talking about unique viewership at one point in time, like the amount of different people that came in and tuned into the scenario, we would match Super Bowl numbers at
absolutely.
36 million people from Worlds. But here's the thing, we actually don't even see the international on here for peak concurrent viewership, which is weird that they actually don't have that on here, because if they peak concurrent viewers at 4.6 million, they should have enough to support this one. But anyway, that's something different, that just our source was a little bit off. But Worlds, 36 million. ESL 1 Cologne for CSGO, 27 million. CSGO, another one, 25 million, 8 million, 8 million. We see all of these different ones for CSGO that are showing up in the ranks here. So that, then, if we were to go by the viewership theory, I think CSGO is actually winning, with an exception that League of Legends actually takes over that number. Sorry, let me retract that. I say League of Legends takes over.
Although I will say CS:GO does have a few advantages as well, especially when they did the partnership for E-League with TBS, which again was a big marketing thing, a big on actual television. Again, insane. We had esports on actual network television, and that did wonders for esports.
Yep.
And it's really funny because looking at this, you can see unique viewers, concurrent viewers. With the unique viewers for a lot of these, most television programs nowadays don't get even like a 7.0 or a 6.0 anymore.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, like I said, wrestling, which is one of the most viewed things here in the States, on average now gets about a 3.0. Mm-hmm. That is infinitely beaten out by like the Gfinity Championship Series, the one Cologne for CS:GO, and where I think this kind of gives even more validity is that our Super Bowl, a lot of our championships, are only for North America.
Yeah.
If you look at one Cologne, which is in Germany, so many of these events are worldwide. Mm-hmm. Esports in general, worldwide, it has a worldwide audience as opposed to the Super Bowl where it's almost exclusively, probably exclusively, a North American audience.
Right.
So for the money, and again, we might be beating a dead horse with our original premise here. Prize pool doesn't have too much of an effect when you have a global audience that is watching a product, and when your advertising is getting seen by, say for Worlds 36, say when your particular ad is seen by, assume 20 million of that see it. That's 20 million people seeing your ad.
Yeah.
And of course, that means you're going to want to advertise and give more money to esports. Esports raises more money that way. It's a very symbiotic relationship that is so impressive that it can happen on this global scale.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool that it came out here. But now the other thing that we need to make sure that we kind of cover over is that we've established the fact now, and this has been several episodes for us on Level Up Weekly, that this is a great phenomenon to watch, to see expand, and to live during this time that this is growing at the rate that it is. Now, of course, the other follow-up question that really follows what I wanted to answer today is, by these standards that we see in our viewership count, corporate sponsorships, and from our overall data and statistics that we've talked about today, who out of the current video games that are competitive esports, who really has the most successful out of them?
Out of the individual esports scenes, or
I would say, well, let's just each scene. So, like, is CS:GO better than League of Legends? Is Dota 2 better than all of them because they have everything? Or what exactly is it? Now we've defined our value of success. We have defined how exactly the revenue was built over for each for each esport, and we've established what sort of view counts that they get for this. So based off of that information, what is our statistical analysis?
Well, there is one thing that I am going to give for the fact that there are so many crossover athletes in esports. Most of the people of Cloud9, they play MOBAs, they play shooters, they play in almost everything that's profitable. People who play in fighting games play in multiple fighting games. So it really comes to the quality of the game to me.
Okay.
And the competitive, and I hate to say it this way, but it boils down to what game is the most competitive? What game has the greatest or the most narrow gap in skill to create an interesting contest? And for that, I really don't know. It's hard to gauge with MOBAs, the difference between MOBAs and shooters. It's a very hard question to answer.
So that's actually something that was something that we could also chat too. So you kind of mentioned that each one has its own specific skill that it requires. You've also mentioned that it's like, well, this one's tougher than this one to do. Isn't that kind of the same thing that we have with regular sports? So what I'm really going off of is, what are we defining as success in terms of what we've defined as success up to this point. I'm not necessarily saying, well, this sport is better than this one, because if this was the argument, then I could be like, oh, hey, basketball is not as tough as football, so therefore football is the more successful sport. That's not necessarily where I'm going with this. The question really is just, what do we consider to be the successful factor out of this? You know, which one has, because of their great viewership, good community, great standing in their current corporate sponsorships, and just in general how well that they've built themselves over the years, where do we see the most success out of them?
That's a very tough question. Do you have any contenders?
So I'll put in my 2 cents. I think right now, I love where League of Legends has actually moved in their esports environments. Do I watch it avidly? No. Do I know people that watch it with a diehard passion and actually watch a competitive signature league that, by the way, is off of Twitch because they were able to get a televised network system for themselves on their own website, which is beautiful that you can just get all of that in one regular platform, which I hope to see more in the coming future.
And more from other sets like, you know, Dota and Rocket League,
Right.
Overwatch, stuff like that.
Their view counts that go inside with that, alongside with their current success at Worlds this year, which was a phenomenal success. Their venue was outstanding. I think that they have done a very good job with their current esports situation. However, I feel like CSGO has been more successful with sponsorships. They have had a lot more esports organizations that have come in and significantly helped a lot of their players in a lot of scenarios. G2 is a great example of this. They are heavily investing into their CSGO team. They're great to see on and off of the, well, I almost wanted to say field, but off of the arena. And it is just beautiful. I just really like how they treat their players. I think that's very cool that they do a very good job of that. Then the other thing, we have Dota 2, which has always had a great supportive community. Why do you think that they put $20 million into that prize pool? That was nuts. Now, we mentioned a lot of this was corporate sponsorships. A lot of it comes... Dota 2 is almost an exception to this because Dota 2 has a lot of money coming in from their key systems. They showed their numbers one year, and I would say out of that 20 million right there, if 11 of it for sure was from, just 11, I think, I'm just being really generous about it, were just from simply the video game itself. The rest of it probably was the rest of the factors that came in. Well, I'd actually say I'll count it 15 million came in strictly from the game. So that's just something to realize that the international championships, has a big factor into it. Even the Kyiv major I watched recently was crazy. They had like 193,000 viewers sitting over on Twitch, which to me was still kind of crazy, but their total view count, I forgot what exactly was. So bearing that all in mind, I think obviously I just named the top 3 that I think everybody expected to be the most successful. But there's also some up-and-coming ones. Rocket League has shown from a $75,000 prize pool in Season 1 to Season 3, moving up to almost, I think it's $375,000 in their prize pool for overall what they've done for their playoffs and everything. To see their venue grow tremendously, their view counts almost triple from the original amount that it was beforehand, at least in league play and playoffs now. Just to see that where they're coming is also a massive amount of potential as well. But right now, given that CSGO, League of Legends, and Dota 2 have had the amount of years that they had in this current industry, we need to also remember that they've had esports in this scene since like 2010.
Yeah.
Like probably the youngest is 2010 at this point. And so that's something to keep in mind too. So that's what I would say. If I had to choose between those 3, I personally believe that I enjoy what Dota 2 does because I love the fact that you have a community that is like, hey, I have $5 in my pocket. I'm going to use that to buy a figure or different skin for my character. And you know what? I know that the money's going to be used not only to help support Valve, keep its efforts in constantly patching this game, but in its also effort to help out the esports scene so that people can walk out with these major prize pools and keep, well, our industry going strong.
And you know, I completely agree. I would put CSGO above, in my personal case, for the fact that they've had something that's a little different in terms of to quantify success, which would be the fact that they had a TV deal.
Yeah.
And that is tremendous for the fact that they had a TV deal, and as such, that led to a lot more sponsors. But there's one thing I kind of like to note here, and this is going to be going back in the day, and I want to see if you remember any of this. Do you remember when there was a satellite cable channel called G4?
You know, I've heard of the name. I don't think I've heard enough of it to really say like a personal 2 cents about it.
Well, G4 was a gaming network. It was a network for gamers, by gamers. Had a lot of like tech shows. That's where E3 was promoted on and showed for many, many years. And one of the things that they would do on that would be they would take some pros from the esport scenes at the time, which were mostly Halo, and would have them, kind of appear in like kind of celebrity roles. And this is where I'm also going to say that I think CSGO has a little bit more of an edge, is for the fact that when you think, and maybe people who really follow Dota or really follow League can notice this or can deter, but back in the day, there was a guy named T-Squared that was featured on a lot of gaming magazines, featured in on G4's channel doing tips and tricks and stuff, and was cited as one of the best Halo players. If we could get a CSGO, League of Legends, World of Tanks, Dota 2 player that had that kind of presence, that kind of representation in media outside of just their specific scene, I think that whichever one could do that and has the potential to do that has the potential to be the most successful scene. And in my personal opinion, due to the nature of the game, I believe CSGO has a higher probability of producing someone like that than League of Legends or Dota or Smite, because MOBAs are a team-based game. They are very team-based. I'm not saying that team-based shooters aren't, like
Right.
Overwatch or CSGO or Halo, but you get a little bit more individual focus on those games, like the focus on the individual. Like you can easily identify that player by it's just easier than you could in the MOBA.
Yeah.
So while I'm not saying Dota 2 or League of Legends are bad, they are fantastic and tremendous by every means in terms of financial success and quality. I believe CSGO has a little bit of an advantage here for the reasons I previously stated.
Okay. Well, I think that pretty much answers what we wanted to answer about this today. I think we pretty much topped over the question. It was one simple question that led into a lot of the discussion that we had today.
Huge discussion.
So and of course we always love to do that here. So of course, thank you guys so much for tuning in to Level Up Weekly this week, guys. It was a great conversation to have alongside with esports, and of course anything that we referenced over in our podcast, we will go ahead and throw a link over in the description, whether it be on Twitch or YouTube. Well, actually more specifically on YouTube, to Podbean, of course, and of course give us the support over here on Patreon and our other following examples as well,
which you can find in the link below.
Exactly. So with that, guys, thank you guys so much for tuning into Level Up Weekly. Welcome to the first time I actually got tongue-tied this hour.
I'm surprised you didn't get tongue-tied with the actual stats. It was more with just the outro.
I just like stats. So with that, guys, thank you guys so much for tuning in for this week of Level Up Weekly, and we hope to see you guys for a Level Up experience next time.